So now that you know a little bit more about how to detect that phony glass from the 1980s, let's take a moment now to try to understand just what this stuff is worth if you end up with some of it. From an earlier video, number 2, on what the new glass is really worth. This runs about 4 minutes, and while you're watching this, remember the 5 tests that we just learned on how to detect these pieces. The items I promised to talk to you about in the ads was, does the new or the reproduction glass have any true value? There are people who are trying to say that it has the value of, say, 60% of the old glass. Now, these are partly collectors who maybe have a basement full of it and hope someone will build a market. After all, there was $12 million worth or more of it sold in the last 15 years. I'm happy to say I haven't seen any of it on the market in a couple of years now, and therefore I have to assume that it's stashed away in basements. Now, if I had a basement full and I was unscrupulous, I would probably try to build a market for this product because there's a lot of people that would like to get rid of it. But let's look at it realistically. First of all, 5 years ago, Pepe Herman's glass company from the Northeast came to the Washington, D.C. convention and put on a slideshow and showed us, with today's modern technology and the diamond wheel and etc., just how easy it was to make a piece of glass with a blank that they bought from Europe. And they showed us that they could start at 8 o'clock in the morning. They can do 1,800 cuts on this piece of glass. They can put it through the acid polish, and by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they can have this piece sitting on the shelf in their showroom ready to sell. They can price it at $265 and still be making a profit. Now, when you figure a $5,000 piece of reproduction glass probably cost the same amount, in other words, less than $265. All of the phony glass, with the possible exception of the colored cut to clear, cost about the same to produce. And the only reason the colored cut to clear would be higher is because the blanks were probably more costly wherever they got those. So if you take that $5,000 piece of glass and you say it is worth 60% of its original value, that's $3,500 on a piece that probably cost somebody less than $300. Now, this just doesn't make sense. And there is no way in the world that I'm going to let any of the collectors that depend on us to keep a pure, clean collection have anything like this. It's just not worth that. Now, by the same logic, if you look at it a little further, let's say, for instance, if somebody were a beautiful oil painter and they could reproduce the Van Gogh painting of those daisies and sunflowers that the Japanese buyer paid $40 million for, does that mean then that this is all of a sudden a phony painting would be worth 60% of a Van Gogh or $24 million? No way, no way. And you can look at it with something that perhaps you're a little more familiar with. Let's look at Tiffany lamps. The wisteria lamps that Tiffany was, that were being sold at the big New York auction houses for, say, the wisteria sold for $380,000 in the 1980s. Does that mean that a reproduction Tiffany that is so good, and believe me, they are so good that those auction houses won't handle some of them today because they just can't be sure. But just because they, the experts, aren't sure, that doesn't mean it's worth $228,000, does it? A phony is a phony. And I don't care what anybody tells you, the actual worth of a piece of the reproduction glass is somewhere under that $265 that the Pepe Herman people can make one at, because that's all the cost that's in it. It has no antiquity value. It has very little intrinsic value. Therefore, let your conscience be your guide as you listen to people try to tell you that this reproduction glass has some significant value.